It is launch day, and the situation is understandably tense, since this is the first time in 27 years that the Archer has been moved. Paul and Rianne, who have sacrificed so much over the last 2 years, are understandably nervous.
Just about to start the lift.
Although every precaution has been taken, there is still so much that could go wrong.
And we have a slight cracking on the gunnels. And we're weighing in at 10 tons on the back. And up she comes. Yahoo! So far so good.
Fantastic.
We used 2 cranes to lift this vessel up because the boat was actually landlocked. A lot of development work had gone on subsequently since this boat was taken out of the water a long time ago. We'd had everything staked on this. We'd sold our house. We'd invested everything, heart and soul, to the project and all the people that had worked on this vessel and taken interest in it. The boat was moved slowly onto the road and then lifted to a position where the trailer could be pushed underneath the frame. And the whole shebang was moved down the road using a lorry which had seen better days. It was the only way out for this elegant young lady. I felt slightly uneasy at the fact that all our hard work and effort was sat on the top of a lorry, trundling its way merrily down some bumpy track.
Right, I think I'm just about done.
She was on the crane at 24 tons, which was remarkable considering we had no engines in or anything. And I knew then that I'd actually got the boat within the right spec that I needed to keep the weight and balance right when the engines were put in. Keeping my fingers crossed and everything else, I watched as 2 cranes lifted the boat from the frame and the trailer and frame were removed from the underneath of the boat.
Yeah, no, you can't fix the boat.
At any moment now, you thought that the boat could probably slip straight out of the slings and into the water. But for the grace of God, it all held together and we had no damage, and the boat was sat 5 foot in the air, and that was the worst time of all, to watch all that money and hard work just sat there when it should be in the water. Step by step the boat was lowered gently down into the water for the first time, like I say, in 31 years. What an achievement. Absolutely fantastic. I was holding more than my breath at the time. I was holding the rope the other side of the lagoon.
Now ain't that a pretty sight?
She was bowed down, which I'd expected. The reason for that is because the engines weren't in, and we calculated that once the engines had gone in, the total weight of the boat would come up to some 28 tons, which would put her on the level mark. Admittedly, she would be 20 tons lighter, so the water line would be slightly higher than she would have been when she was in service, but on the whole she was square and straight and level once the engines were put in. I put it down to good engineering skills on behalf of my father.
Originally, the Gay-class MTBs were powered by 3 Merlin Packard engines that produced up to 5,000 horsepower. This enabled them to reach speeds of over 40 knots. They were fuelled by aviation gas and would use up to 10 tonnes in a typical operation. Today, to fill these tanks would cost around £13,000. However, for reasons of fuel economy, finance and safety, Paul has had to replace them.
Okay, what we have here is two 650 horsepower Detroit diesels. They're two strokes, they're supercharged and they're turbocharged. Being two strokes, they work twice as fast as a four-stroke engine and subsequently are rather noisy. But these are intercooled and they have their water pass through the crankcases and around all the exteriors and then are washed out the side through the tank at the back here. Right, putting the engines in at Chelsea Marina consisted of using a crane to lift these up through the hatches and down onto the engine mounts. They actually fitted quite well, and it's remarkable that 50 years ago the engine mounts that they made then actually fit these engines today. A stroke of luck. The engines themselves were built in 1985. They are a match pair. They come with their Allison gearboxes, which are at 2-to-1, which means that the engines produce their power at maximum power at 2,300 RPM, with a prop shaft running at 1,100 RPM. So even though the shaft speeds are not so high, the power output is a lot for the size of engine. They fit nicely in here. They look big, but they're not. I call them the little babies. Once the engines were installed and all the mechanics and mechanical fixings were installed, we had the problem then we couldn't actually run these engines up because of the wake that they produce out the back of the boat. Now, to overcome this, the only way we could do it is to run down the River Weaver on tickover, which is at, believe it or not, 650 RPM. On tickover, we were still managing to, let's say, match or break the speed limit for the River Weaver, but we had a special concession to actually manoeuvre the boat down on tickover, and the boat actually performed as well, very well indeed, in the water. After 10 knots, we were able to gain rudder control, so that gives you an idea of how fast the boat we hope will do, which should be around 30 knots at sea, which is really quite commendable for a boat of this size and for her age.
The Gay class boats were versatile. Armaments could include two 21-inch torpedo tubes, a Mark 7 40mm Bofors cannon, a 20mm twin Oerlikon machine gun, two Browning machine guns on the bridge, and depth charges.
This is a Mark III Bofors gun, manufactured in 1943. Was used by the Navy as an anti-aircraft gun. It's not the gun that would have been on the boat, even though they had the Bofors gun, but it was a later model. It was a Mark VII, which was hydraulically operated and not manually, as you can see here, by two operatives. The gun's a quick firing gun. It's an automatic. All the cannon shells would have been stored in racks. Operator here would raise the gun. The operator this side would traverse the gun around, and a loadmaster would stand on the back and put the shells into the breech. After the gun had fired, the shell would be ejected out the front into a cloth bag. It's the same principle as the one that was on the boat originally, but this one, as I say, was made a few years earlier, but it's still good, and for the historical purposes, it's another piece of history that can be saved. And the gun's going to be sent off to Birmingham to be proofed, because at the moment we're not sure if it's deactivated or not. In full working order, this would be an evil piece of machinery, but probably wonderful to fire.
The gun that's put on the back of this vessel is a 20mm Oerlikon cannon. They were used for anti-aircraft work throughout the Second World War, and after the Second World War were incorporated on this vessel, bearing in mind it would have been a twin 20mm Oerlikon cannons and not the single, but they are impossible to get, and we were very fortunate enough to be donated this by a gentleman from Wales, and it looks very nice on the back of the boat. It's not the original, but it does show you roughly what was on the back. Primarily it was used for anti-aircraft work, but it would be also used for shore battering, and that was when they incorporated the SBS aboard the vessel. In disembarking and embarking these people, you had to protect them from shore batteries, from light small arms fire, etc., that would be coming from shoreline while they retrieved the guys. So it's a dual purpose gun. It can be used for either anti-aircraft guns or for shore battering.
Well, after the last time we spoke, the gun had gone off to be deactivated. It was done in Nottingham, at a place called Right and Arms, and then went to the Birmingham Proof House to be stamped and ticketed. And the gun arrived on a Saturday afternoon in the middle of all the traffic at Salford Quays, and was dropped off on the quayside with the help of the local fire brigade and a telefork machine. We were able to put the gun back on where it belongs, and as you can see, with a coat of paint on, she looks just as good as she did when she was built in 1943, and it makes a good addition to the boat as well. So I'm very pleased that everything went well and it all came back, and it actually looks like it should do from the drawings.
Paul, how did you get your hands on the weapons?
Let's say I have some high friends in very low places. It was hard, yes.
With a recently formed crew, the Archer will be put through her paces with a journey from Manchester to Watchet in Somerset. However, with everything hanging on these sea trials, will Paul's efforts be victorious or be in vain?